Okay, so I'm John Parsons, and just for the sake of the video, if anybody wants to know who I am, where do you find my stuff, I have a website called johnparsons.org, and I'm going to play some excerpts from some of my radio shows here a little bit tonight. So if you want to find them, if you go to johnparsons.org, click on the Twitter link, that'll take you to my Twitter channel, and I usually post my radio show on my Twitter channel. So if you're looking for me, you want to hear a little bit more, that's where you find that information. I'm going to talk today about EMF, or electromagnetic frequency. Essentially, another term you'll hear in this context is EMR, electromagnetic radiation. And I want to do, it's going to be a little bit, I've tried to make it simple so that we can understand what this is about, because it's one of those things that's not seen. You can't see it, at least until we come into the realm of the visible light, then we can see things. But out of the realm of the visible light, we're into you can't see microwaves, you can't see radio waves, but they still have an effect in our world. And that is really what I want to talk about, is their effect, and specifically their effect on our health tonight. And I come to the story tonight about this whole subject because of a journey that I went through with my first wife, where she had 2 battles with cancer. The first battle, she recovered, and that was with radiotherapy and chemo. The second, she didn't have chemo the first time. The second battle, she didn't recover, she died after a 5-year battle. And I began to learn in all of that process that there are other ways to treat cancer than the traditional allopathic medicine route. But by the time I discovered that, the effects of the chemo had already destroyed her kidneys. She was on dialysis, and by the time you get to being on dialysis, you're very limited in some of the other alternates that you can actually begin to apply. But that was what got me on this whole journey of different methods of healing, which is why I'm so appreciative of what Dana and Kaylin are talking about here, because this is so needed in our world. And unfortunately, as I discovered with my first wife, they don't tell you this if you go to the hospital, and you end up on the journey, and that some of the effects of their treatments are not reversible. And so by the time you get to the point that your kidneys no longer work, there's not a whole lot you can do the alternates are very limited. But what I discovered as we got into this journey of alternates is that one of the big problems that we face is the danger of EMF, or electromagnetic frequency, and how that can affect our body. Now, traditional medicine and traditional scientific has a box where they put that in, and they say, well, there's certain, we know, X-rays are dangerous, and certain the gamma rays are dangerous. But no, the other stuff, which is the realm, of microwaves and cell phones, it's all safe. And that's not actually true. It turns out that information is not quite accurate. And so I want to talk about, so the area of controversy are these frequencies which are used for cell phones, which are used for microwaves and other things, are they dangerous to our health? My conclusion, as I've been looking at this for a number of years, is yes, and that's based on not my research, but the research of many other eminent people who've looked into this and come to these conclusions. One of the articles that I will reference today is a series that has been running in the Epoch Times. How many of you subscribe to or watch the Epoch Times? Epoch Times, depending on how you pronounce it. Americans pronounce it Epic, but I pronounce it Epoch, really. But anyway, they have had a series called EMF, the Invisible Hazard. And they've had, this is I think it's a 4-part series, and this is a very in-depth article that goes into some of the research that's being done and why, and I'll read you little excerpts from that as we go along. But I want to try and give you sources of information where you can research this a little bit more, because there's plenty of stuff out there. If you start digging into this stuff, you'll find that there's material out there, and you can find out quite a lot about it. And so I encourage you, this is going to be a primer. This is going to get you started, perhaps, on the journey of understanding EMF. I mean, one of the things that, I don't sleep anywhere near that cell phone. This stuff is not good for you. I don't hold it up to my head to talk to it very often. I do sometimes if I got no other way, but typically I'll put it on speaker so that it's not. So and I don't even sleep with it in the same room. It goes in another room if I'm asleep. So these are issues. These are problems, and unfortunately, they're not problems people want to talk about. I mean, the French government has just come out. I mean, this is a story I think was today or yesterday, that the iPhone 12 exceeds health levels of use. Well, of course, Apple deny this, and oh no, we've sent safety standards, and you're met with a complete barrage of information from the tech giants that say, oh no, this is just conspiracy. Well, that's the French government health study on the issue. So there are real issues, but it's quite hard, as it is for many things in our world, to actually get to the truth these days. And that's why if I give you good sources, I find Epoch Times is a good, reliable source. They're pretty balanced in their journalism. So I try and give you those kind of sources if I can, if I've got them available. So I want to begin and just with a little bit of understanding about what is. This is going to take you back to school for a minute or two, because I want us to put this in the context of what is, how do radio waves work, because this information matters for us here. So
light is commonly defined as an electromagnetic wave. But what is an electromagnetic wave? And also, what is electric and magnetic about light? To answer this question, we need to talk briefly about electric fields. But don't worry, it's going to be short. A charge placed at a given point in space will generate an electric field around it. The strength of that field at a given position is represented by a vector. The magnitude and the direction of this vector represent the magnitude and the direction of the force that would experience a positive charge of 1 coulomb placed at that position. Now, imagine a metallic bar and focus on one of the electrons in the bar. This electron creates an electric field around it. Then, connect the bar to a source of alternative current. The electron will move back and forth in the bar with the current. It will oscillate. And so will the direction of the electric field the electron generates. This idea is a key point. If you look at how the y component of the electric field strength vector changes with time, it is oscillating, and it can be represented by a beautiful cosine or sine curve. In the second part of the 19th century, Maxwell showed that a changing electric field generates a changing magnetic field and vice versa. So the oscillation of an electric field always generates a magnetic field that oscillates too. Let's go back to our electron. Suppose now that I choose for the alternative current a frequency of oscillation of 10 kHz. This means that the electron oscillates 10,000 times per second. And so does the electric field it generates, as well as the induced magnetic field. Imagine now that I place another metallic bar in the oscillating electric field. The electrons in this bar will feel an oscillating force. Yes, they are in an electric field, so they feel a force. They will start to oscillate too. What we did here is we transmitted a signal through space. This is how radio works. Yeah, we have two antennas. The first bar is emitting the signal. The second bar is receiving the signal. When the oscillating electromagnetic field is generated by the first bar, it propagates through space at the speed of light. Yeah, the oscillating electromagnetic field is what we refer as an electromagnetic wave or EM wave. And it is also more commonly referred as light. For example, let's increase the frequency of the alternative current up to 10 trillion Hertz. The electron in the bar will oscillate at 10 trillion Hertz, and so will the electric field it generates. The resultant EM wave is now infrared radiation. Let's increase the frequency a little more, up to 1 quadrillion Hertz. The metallic bar starts to glow now. It emits visible light.
Okay, so simply put, he's saying that once these the oscillation here creates a magnetic field, an electromagnetic field, right? The faster the oscillation is, it takes you up, higher up in the what we call the spectrum. And if you come to the spectrum of visible light, you come up into the realm of visible light. The frequencies we're talking about are not as high as the frequencies of visible light. But these are the microwave frequencies. These are the ones that concern us. Mostly the radio you listen to, AM radio, long wave or FM, shorter wave, they're generally considered not to be harmful, at least as is generally understood. There are some other studies that might come up with some different views about that, but it's more about very much proximity if you go and stand really close to a tower or something. But generally they're not considered harmful, right? But the lower frequency, so we're going to look at I want to look at this here. Let's go here. Okay, this is another, so I know this seems a little bit technical, but one piece will build on another piece here, and hopefully this will make a little bit more sense as we go along. So let's try this one now.
In the modern world, we humans are completely surrounded by electromagnetic radiation. Have you ever thought of the physics behind these traveling electromagnetic waves? The great scientist, Heinrich Hertz, was the first man to transmit and detect electromagnetic waves. In his famous experiment, a high-voltage current was applied to the two ends of two metal wires, which generated a spark in the gap between them. This spark resulted in the radiation of electromagnetic waves. Those electromagnetic waves traveled through the air and created a spark in a metal coil located over a meter away. If you had placed an LED in that gap, the bulb would have glowed. This was a clear case of electromagnetic wave propagation and detection. However, before Hertz, the brilliant mathematician James Clerk Maxwell had already laid out the foundation.
You can send this stuff through the air. And the point is that this stuff can actually affect your physical body. That's the problem here. All right, so they have something that they call the electromagnetic spectrum. Now, I wanted to make that a bit easier for you to see, but let's see if we can make that bigger. Okay, that doesn't help. That's not going to work either. Okay. So, if I walk over here, because I can't read it myself from here, you will see that it starts here. Okay, so you start here. This is radio waves. This is microwaves. This is infrared. This is the visible light spectrum, and this is ultraviolet up here. So, what happens is over here, this is radio waves. So if you look at the sine wave, it's a longer wave, all right? But when you get over down here, it's much shorter. So it's a high frequency, but the wave is shorter. And the point of this is that when you get over here into the infrared, the microwave here, which is there, the waveform is short. It's a very short waveform, but it's a very high frequency. And that oscillation, what they say is that this oscillation is what is damaging, and it can be damaging to our health. That is where the problem is. And so I want to play a little bit now, but I just wanted you to see that spectrum there, because that spectrum is important, because over to the right, see somewhere there in the middle there, between the red and the purple, is the visible light spectrum. Beyond the visible light spectrum, you come over into the realm of X-rays, gamma rays, and all the rest of it. And you go to the dentist, he takes an X-ray, they all step out of the room while they take the X-ray, because they know that causes cell damage. And so you can only be exposed to a certain amount of X-ray, and cumulatively, that's where we get to, the far end of that is radiation sickness and all of that. But so we know that this stuff is damaging to the cells. But what traditionally they've said, that the stuff that is to the right of that chart, to the right of the visible light, which is right there between the red and the purple, is the stuff that's bad. But what we are discovering is that the stuff to the left in the microwave realm is also dangerous to health. And that's the trouble. That is where this problem comes. He talks about how even back in the time of Nazi Germany, the dangers of this stuff were known. He talks about something called Havana syndrome, where people in the American embassy in Havana developed tinnitus and other really bad problems, and it was ultimately traced to microwave attacks coming from the Russians at that time. I mean, this goes back some time. So there's a whole history of microwaves being used as weapons of war, and they have very advanced weapons of war, which he knows all about. And he talks about his experience, because he understands this to the point that he's worked in the industry and he has designed these weapons of war. Well, then in the city in the north of England where he lives, they put in 5G. Now, 5G, so-called 5G internet, is a little bit different than 4G. Most of what we're getting at the moment is 4G. 5G requires what they call a close array. And in the United Kingdom, where they've put in 5G, they've put it in the street lamps. So he started looking at these street lamps and he started recognizing these are actual weapons of war that they've put in the street lamp. This is the same technology that he was familiar with that was being used is microwave weaponry, and then they put it in and turned it on, and people started getting sick, people started having nosebleeds, all kinds of terrible things started happening to people. Now, one of the things that we find out is that in Wuhan, China, at the outbreak of COVID, that we found that at the same time as that outbreak occurred, they had turned on 5G in that city. And if you remember, in the early part of COVID, there were all kinds of problems with the cruise liners. Remember the cruise ships? And the cruise ships were running 5G. They were one of the first outfits that were running 5G. So this 5G, which is 5 gigahertz, it's a description of the frequency that is used in these transmissions, we're finding out that it's dangerous, right? Now, the reason that it's worse in the context of COVID is because the COVID shots also contain, and are known to contain, have been proven to contain nanoparticles, small particles, right? He talks about the dangers of nanoparticles. We don't think much about nanoparticles, but there are nanoparticles in most cosmetics. A lot of cleaning products, even like shampoos and that, have nano products in them. And what was found is that there are nano products or nano pieces, little tiny pieces, in these vaccines. These vaccines are not normal vaccines in any way, shape or form, but these nanoparticles can be activated by 5G. So, if you listen to the mainstream, they'll say all of that is conspiracy theory. It really isn't conspiracy theory. I've been tracking with people who are quite eminently qualified people who are tracking this under microscopes and seeing what's going on, and it is quite disturbing. That's the far end of this. That's the extreme end of it. But long before we got to the 5G stuff, we found out that the stuff that we are dealing with just from our cell phones, from microwaves, are dangerous to us, and even from actual the EMF from actual power wires in your house. You don't want, they've done studies on people who live near to high voltage pylons and stuff like that. If you live near one of those, they're detrimental effects because of that. And so I discovered that because I was looking into the alternate treatments for cancer and discovered how dangerous some of this stuff was that most people we're not aware of. We're completely oblivious to it because we haven't been told, because the people who are doing it have vested interest in not telling us that they're doing it and not telling us about these dangers. And so this becomes an increasing problem area for us of concern. So let me see where I want to go now with this. Let's go over here a minute. So anyway, that's Mark Steele, and like I say, you can hear him on my radio shows. So he's there. This again talks about the different areas of in the spectrum. So to understand this spectrum of the electromagnetic frequency waves, this is like publicly available information. I think I got that from NASA. That's just telling you that. Now, this is quite...
In this video, we're going to go over the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're going to go in order. The first one you need to know are radio waves. Radio waves have the lowest energy but the longest wavelength. After radio waves, there are microwaves, and then it's infrared. After infrared, you have the visible light spectrum. You have colors such as red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. There's indigo and violet, but I'm just going to put V for violet. After violet, you have ultraviolet rays, and then you have X-rays, and then gamma rays, and then after gamma, you have cosmic radiation. What you need to know is that as you go to the right, the energy increases. So gamma rays have more energy than X-rays. As you go to the right, the frequency increases as well. So ultraviolet light has a higher frequency than infrared. As you go to the left, the wavelength increases. So radio waves are longer than microwaves.
So one of the things he mentions there is infrared, and one of the things that my friend Mark Steele, the weapons expert, talks about is he had designed some of this stuff, and he talks about this is in Vietnam, they started using this stuff militarily with the soldiers, and they started getting eye problems because the infrared caused. Now they'll tell you that infrared is safe, but infrared started causing all kinds of eye problems to soldiers in Vietnam, back in Vietnam. So this stuff's been around a long time. They know about it, but they just don't like to tell us about it, and they don't like us to know about it, apparently. So these are real problem areas. Okay, that just kind of, he goes through some stuff in that video where he tries to explain so we understand. Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to finish that sentence, but you said that the nanoparticles are activated by 5G. The layman, what does that mean? When it starts to, it's going to affect our health. Do you have any ideas?
Well, it depends what the nanoparticles. The problem with nano is, first of all, nano is out of the realm of anything that we can see. So you've got to have, with our eye, I mean, you've got to have high-powered microscopes to see what's going on. But what we are finding is that it activates changes within the human body, and those changes are actually what the people who are looking at what's happening is that actually what they believe was contained within the vaccines was a nano array, which basically turned you as a person into a receiver, so that then there's all kinds of ways that our body work can be affected by the signals that's sent, and it turns on and can control different things in our body. I mean, it sounds like the most crazy science fiction that you can even think of. But I've listened to enough people who know a lot more than I do about it to have become convinced that this is exactly what is going on. And that's why I don't want 5G in my house. They say that a lot of stuff is 5G, and it isn't always 5G, but they say that. So you've got to kind of be a little bit aware of that. I mean, my phone is actually LTE on it. It's not 5G, right? Now, it depends on your phone. It depends on what is available from the towers. So we have to be, and I don't even want, I like to use wired internet rather than Wi-Fi, because that increases your risk. I'm going to go through some things that can mitigate against this in just a minute here. But there's a lot more to say on that topic, and I can point you to some sources to dig into it. But there is a whole lot more to say on that.
So in other words, the nanoparticles inside of us turn us into a receiver. Is that correct?
Well, the nanoparticles enhance our status as a receiver. That would be correct, yes.
It seems like that demonstration they gave where they had the two wires going up to there, it brought a spark and it sent it to another piece of object.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting. I don't know, I hear things, but I can't prove them, but they're also in the chemtrails spraying nanoparticles.
Correct, that's correct.
Why would you do that? If they are doing that, I don't know.
And these cross the blood-brain barrier.
And nanoparticles can cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yes. So we're into.
It's a weapon.
It is a weapon. It is a weapon, and the more you look into it, the more horrifying it gets.
Because we're electrical beings.
Correct. That's right.
Our cells are made up of protons, neutrons, electrons, and they're affected by magnetic fields.
Correct.
They're affected by these things.
Correct. And so, in that context, I need to say this because there is a positive use of frequency or EMF for healing as well. So it isn't all negative, right? There is a lady that I know over in northern Minnesota in Duluth who was been working with frequency healing for a long, long time, and I told this story in one of the classes. But she worked for a time for a doctor who was associated with Mayo. She was interning at that point, and she said, "Well, this stuff works. Why can't we get this stuff?" And he said, "No, they're never going to get it because they make money out of people being sick. They don't want people to be well." And that, unfortunately, that's true. And so she's been doing this for a long time, and I realized that, as I looked into alternate methods of cancer healing, basically, and Dana can talk about this too, but it basically comes down to things that tip over to get because basically if you've got cancer, your immune system is not functioning, it's malfunctioning. But the balances of changes that it takes to get it to work is actually not a whole lot. It might be just a little bit. You've got to tip the balance. And there's different ways that you can do this. There's different treatments that are out there. Some of them are frequency related, frequency healing. So this is a positive aspect of using this stuff. Others, of course, are related to diet, detoxing, all of those things. But instead of the hugely invasive, often invasive and very major effects that normal medicine tends to use, if you can just tip that balance a little bit, the body will actually heal itself. That's what I discovered in this process. But what I did discover is the danger of EMF. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that just before we close out here. Let me see. So that was the last one of those. And so wanted to do was read you just some pieces out of this these articles that I've been talking about that were published in the Epoch Times. This is from August. So, as mysterious cases of microwave syndrome continue to surface, growing doubts are emerging over the harm caused by the radiation emitted by 4th generation 4G and 5th generation 5G wireless networks and other electromagnetic fields. However, many people do not know that EMFs are an essential element our bodies need, like water and air. Electromagnetic radiation, also known as electromagnetic fields or EMFs, is one of the four fundamental forces of nature, along with gravity, strong nuclear and weak nuclear forces. It is an invisible force that exists everywhere, created by electric charges and magnetic waves. So that goes over to what Caitlin's point, that we're electromagnetic beings in a certain sense. EMFs encompass all light and life forms. Humans emit electromagnetic radiation too, such as heat, which can be detected using infrared cameras. There are different types of EMFs. EMFs with frequencies lower than the visible light spectrum are said to be non-ionizing radiation. These EMFs include electricity in power lines, radio frequency radiation, including microwave radiation and infrared radiation. Non-ionizing radiation is usually considered safe for humans since it cannot remove electrons from the atoms and molecules that make up cells. Electron removal can damage DNA, which puts cells at the risk of cancer, which is why they go out of the room at the dentist when they give you an X-ray. On the other hand, ionizing radiation, EMFs with higher frequencies, have more energy and can remove electrons. These include ultraviolet light, X-rays and gamma rays. Prolonged exposure to these may lead to cancer. And this then goes on, it says, among the, quote, safe EMF research suggests that radio frequency EMFs, which are often man-made, may be able to cause adverse health effects even without electron removal. So this is just kind of repeating what I've already said. Radio frequency EMFs, most commonly released by phones and Wi-Fi, smart electronics, Bluetooth devices and TVs, affect the vibration of charged particles inside the body, causing them to change trajectories. Emeritus Professor Martin Powell from the Washington State University theorizes that these fields can alter the electric environment around voltage-gated calcium channels residing in cellular surfaces. The channels can then open up, causing a sudden influx of calcium ions. This can lead to oxidative stress inside cells and cause DNA damage, cellular damage, inflammation, cell death, and other associated pathologies. So that's the problem that is caused by these so-called safe EMFs. So there's lots more in this article to go into there. I just want to go to just a minute. How long have we got? We're kind of running out of time here. So I'm going to just jump over here to this piece here. This details some of the things that we can do to mediate against this. This is actually an ebook, steps, and I'm going to put it over here so you can see it. Steps to reduce exposure, 5G and EMF, essential guide. And basically they go through, and I'll give you a link to where you can find this. Of course, they quote Dr. McCullough and other people here in the research. And now they talk about some of the things you can do. Simply put, this is I think this is the simplest point. The more distance between you and any device, the better. So EMFs radiate in a spherical pattern from their source. They go in all directions, and logically they get weaker with distance. And he goes into Newton's law. But the fact of the matter is, you can, by moving your phone away from your body, you can make a huge amount of difference. At 5 feet away in the diagram, radiation is only 4% of what it is right next to the object. The other is time. The less time spent close to devices, the better. And the Israeli schools have done all kinds of research. There's a researcher I've tracked with in Israel who's done all kinds of research to the damage caused to kids by this stuff. Now, by the way, during COVID, they installed 5G in all the schools. That was what they were busy doing. And yet researchers have come out and said this is dangerous to kids, it's not safe to kids, and yet that's what they did. So, and they didn't tell us they were doing that. We got that anecdotally from engineers who were working on the installs who told what they were doing, but there was no announcements about that.
Globally,
They did that globally or just?
We know they did it in America. I don't know for sure that they did it globally. We definitely know that happened in America. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence that indicates it happened here. But then this research from Israel indicates that there is problems for kids with this EMF issue. So the next thing is time. If you're going to be, if you've got to take a phone call and put the phone up to your ear, keep that phone call short, or don't do it all the time. I mean, sometimes people are wearing their phone on their shoulder, they're putting it in their pocket, and I do that too sometimes. We all do it at different times, but at the end of the day, as soon as I think about it, get it away from me, put it over there, stay away from it, get as far away from it as possible. Go ahead.
Well, I also have heard of people having their phones, like for a woman carrying it on her shoulder, putting it inside of her bra, and then having horrible breast problems, cancer from that. And then also they were saying that, with the kids setting their laptops on their laps.
Yes, on their genitals.
Was decreasing boys from, developing reproductively, and same for girls, causing horrible problems for their inability to procreate from the waves of having the laptop on their, close to their organs. And my goodness, this is a bad deal.
Go ahead.
Turn it off. Is there any good difference in turn it off?
Yeah, turn it off is a good thing to do. Turn it off as much as you can. Yes.
I don't need to have research. When I was working for a company, I had a lot of customers, and I needed to keep working, but I needed to talk to my customers. And so there's this invention called a Bluetooth.
Right.
And so I thought, what a great thing. So I started using it, and so I could talk to my customers all day long and stay doing what I need to do. And when I started using that, I started getting this severe headaches right by my head. And it got so bad that I got ringing in my ear, and it was just where that Bluetooth was, and I finally got rid of it. It took not a very long time either. Once I got rid of that went away. I still, once in a while, have some pains here. So I know firsthand there are effects to that.
That reminds me, my brother has always used the Bluetooth and thought the same thing as you. And now he's got tinnitus so bad. He's in, almost, it's not good. That is a bad situation. And he is concerned that the Bluetooth caused it, because he's done it for years and years and years and thought it was great. And now he has terrible tinnitus, and they haven't been able to get it to stop.
So another thing you can do is you can get an EMF meter, but they're about $200. I haven't got one yet, but that's one thing you can actually do to take some readings in your house. I mean, one of the things that I got here, we just moved into this house over here, and so I need internet for what I do, because I do a lot of video stuff, right? But I like to have my computers wired rather than using the actual Wi-Fi. But then I discovered that they'll give you another unit to put in another room. Oh yeah, but then I asked the tech, and it turns out that the unit, which you can take anywhere in the house, and sure, you can plug your device into it, a wired connection, but it's talking wirelessly to the main unit somewhere else in the house. So I'm like, okay, so what is the danger? Which is one of the reasons I want to get a meter and measure what is really going on here. Where is that getting its signal from? So these are problems. Now, here's something you can talk about here. This talks about your bedroom. It talks about get rid of electric blankets. It talks about turning off things that you don't need. It says battery stuff. It says battery-powered alarm clocks are much better than plugged-in ones. It talks about leave some space between your bed and the wall, because there's all these wires behind the wall, and you don't want to sleep right next to them. You want to be further away from them. So if you can move your bed away from the wall, that's better for you, depending on the wires that are behind that. And they talk about poles, power poles and all of that kind of stuff. They talk about the
electric car.
Interesting.
I don't know really what the situation with electric cars are. I know that electric cars are dangerous in that they do catch fire, they blow up, all kinds of weird things happen with those batteries. What kind of EMFs you've got going on in an electric car, I don't know. I haven't measured, and I don't know anybody. I haven't read anything about that. Go ahead.
Something that came out after the Maui fires. I listened to this guy named Joe Imbriano, and he has all kinds of information about smart meters and all this stuff. And he said you can start a fire by any smart device. So on your refrigerator, your water meter, your electric meter, if those are set up to be smart meters for any of those objects, they can take a drone and send a frequency to that smart meter and start a fire. That's not anything natural, but those smart meters are conductors that can be exploded and turned into a weapon by a drone and start a fire just like that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the Maui fires, there is a lot of discussion about whether or not those Maui fires were actually started by some kind of directed energy weapon operated from a satellite. And if that is in case, and there's a lot of discussion about the fires in California having been started that way. There's much more to be said about that, which I won't take a lot of time tonight to say. But people who are researching about these smart meters are very concerned about the output levels of smart meters, whether they're electric smart meters are worse than other kinds, but they use them in big cities, and now in little cities here. I mean, they're using them for water, they're using them for natural gas or city gas, whatever. So thermostats, yeah. So these are problems, and these are increasing. I mean, I will not have. I had my water shut off and I was without water for 77 days because I wouldn't have one put into the basement of my house. But we're going to find that the electric companies are going to shortly be putting them on the outside of our houses if they haven't already. Now, there are things that you can do to sort of mitigate against that. There are various shields and things that we can try to use. I can't honestly. I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars. I mean, there are people that sell shields that will shield your home, that will have some mitigatory effect. I can't speak to the effectiveness of those, but I know that people say that they've been tested and that they do work. And you can do a lot more research on that topic because there are shields. I mean, there are shields that you can have, little devices that you can put on your computer that are said to mitigate them, or those kind of shields as well. I've got some of those. We've got those in the house. I've got one I don't think I've got one on that computer, but I've got one on other computers. But so those are definite things. You can wear one. I mean, I know Terry wears one. I've got one that hangs in the car. I couldn't quite stand having the thing around my neck all the time, so it's in my car. But there are those kind of things, and I would just encourage you to investigate those things, to look into those things, and try and mitigate your exposure to EMF as much as you possibly can.